Hello, everyone, and welcome to our afternoon media roundtable launching the new U.S. Arctic Research Plan for 2022 to 2026, a bold strategy for changing the Arctic. I'm Liza from the AGU Media Relations Office. This session is meant to be more informal, open discussion. So our scientists are going to present some brief materials, and then you're all free to ask questions. We invite you to use the raise your hand function, turn on your video, and go ahead and ask your question live if you're comfortable, or if you'd rather type it into the chat. We'll see that, and Liz Weinberg here will read your question and pose it to the panel. On-site reporters, we have a few folks who are on-site panelists, and if you'd like to come over to the quiet room in R05 following roundtable, you're welcome to chat with them in person. Slides and additional materials from this briefing will be posted to the Press Information Exchange on AGU Connect, and I'll drop a link into the chat about that shortly. This media roundtable is being recorded, as I said, and the recording will also be posted to AGU's YouTube channel if you want to review it. And we'll link to that on the Press Information Exchange as well. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to our panel to introduce themselves and tell you a little more about what they're going to talk about today. And they will be also moderating the discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my video. Enjoy.
Thanks, Liza. Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Liz Weinberg. I am the Community Coordinator for the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee, or IARPC. So we are going to have a brief presentation today providing an overview of the new Arctic Research Plan 2022 through 2026, which we are launching today, and then we'll open the floor for questions. So first, I just want to introduce our speakers. So with us today, we have the Honorable Dr. Jane Lubchenco, who is Deputy Director for Climate and Environment at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. We have Dr. Nikoosh Carlo, who's the Arctic Research Plan Development Director at the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee. Dr. Roberto Delgado, who's the Program Director for the Arctic Observing Network at the National Science Foundation. Roberto is a lead drafter for the Community Resilience and Health section of the plan. Dr. Michael Falkowski, Program Scientist for NASA's Terrestrial Ecology Program and lead drafter for the Arctic Systems Interactions section of this plan. Dr. Erica Hill, Program Director for Arctic Social Sciences at the National Science Foundation and a lead drafter for the Sustainable Economies and Livelihoods section of the plan. And Dr. Katya Kontar, International Global Change Science Lead for the U.S. Global Change Research Program and one of the drafters for the Risk Management and Hazard Mitigation section of the plan. So I'm going to ask Nikoosh and Jane to give us a brief overview of the plan. And then I will help moderate the questions. So Nikoosh, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Salve, io mi trovo in questo momento in America.
Oh, and I will ask folks to make sure to mute yourselves if you are not speaking. All right, Nikoosh, go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much, Liz. Hi, everyone. Welcome. So glad that you are with us today. Thank you for making the time. Today, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy and the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee are launching the new Arctic Research Plan, which covers the 5-year period between 2022 and 2026. The Arctic is the most rapidly changing region on Earth. The region is experiencing unprecedented warming at a faster rate than anywhere on the planet. Climate change impacts the ability of Arctic communities to harvest food, to safely travel, and poses major threats to infrastructure, to housing, and to economic development. And what is happening in the Arctic has huge implications for the rest of the world. To name just a few factors, melting glaciers lead to sea level rise that threatens coastal communities all over the world. Thawing permafrost releases greenhouse gases that accelerate global warming, and melting sea ice can no longer reflect heat away from the planet. The new Arctic Research Plan provides a bold vision for federal agencies to nimbly and collaboratively help understand and support resilience in the face of these changes. The rate at which new challenges are emerging in the Arctic requires quick and decisive action. The new Arctic Research Plan aims to deliver the science and knowledge to decision makers in the Arctic and beyond. The plan also provides pathways to improve coordination among federal agencies working in the Arctic, as well as to strengthen relationships between those federal agencies and Indigenous communities, academia, and non-federal researchers, the state of Alaska, nonprofits, and the private sector and international organization. the image that you're seeing here is the cover to the report. So if you have a chance to download that, again, spend some time looking at the cover. It really helps illustrate some of the things that we are trying to achieve. And it was designed by Molly Trainer of Nome, Alaska. On this next slide, this is what we're calling the plan framework. Again, you can go download the plan on our website, iarpiccollaborations.org/plan. Maybe Liz will put that in the chat here as we keep going. But I wanted to go over some of the higher level details. The plan is a high level strategy. It outlines key research goals. It builds on successes of previous plans. The goals that are in the plan are linked to 4 priority areas. And you can see them in red here in this graphic. They're community resilience and health, Arctic systems interactions, sustainable economies and livelihoods, and risk management and hazard mitigation. Whereas previous plans focused primarily on environmental processes, the new plan shifts to address societal issues that require a more complex and a more multidisciplinary approach. The plan is also informed by 5 foundational activities, which support that multidisciplinary approach. And you'll see them at the bottom of this graphic. They are data management, education, training and capacity building, monitoring, observing, modeling and prediction, participatory research and Indigenous leadership and research, and technology innovation and application. So while a 5-year planning cycle allows us to be relatively nimble, things can change very quickly, as we have seen during the COVID-19 pandemic. So things rise during that 5-year period. So with that in mind, IARPC is moving to a biennial implementation or a 2-year implementation process for the plan. So while the Arctic Research Plan 2022 to 2026 provides this high-level strategy and goals, there will also be 2-year implementation plans that will be more granular. They will provide specifics about tangible objectives and deliverables. So this planning structure will also provide more opportunities for Arctic researchers and residents to drive the work that we do. The plan will be implemented using IARPC Collaborations, which is our online collaborative platform run by IARPC. So now I'll turn to Dr. Lubchenco to give us some more context about where the plan sits within other administration efforts.
Thanks, Nikoosh. And thank you to you, but also everybody that has contributed to this plan. We here in the White House are really, really excited about it. And we recognize the incredible work that's gone into it, the extensive consultation over multiple iterations, lots of agencies. So it really has come together in a beautiful way. Now, many of you may notice that this plan emphasizes a number of the key priorities of the Biden-Harris administration. First, climate change is front and center for obvious reasons. Climate change affects everything in the Arctic, from energy, water, and food security to community health and resilience, from natural resource development to infrastructure and commercial activities, from ecosystem services to hazard mitigation, everything. And our goal here is to obtain the knowledge that's needed to enable all players to better understand and respond effectively to climate change in the Arctic and beyond. Second, this plan highlights the importance of racial equity and tribal consultation and inclusion. Specifically, the plan includes participatory research and Indigenous leadership in research by seeking to increase capacity within the federal government and the researcher community to effectively engage with Indigenous communities. The plan also supports community-driven efforts to engage in and lead research. And finally, the plan focuses on enabling communication and coordination among agencies, researchers, and communities, sustaining engagement, and building trust. The plan also includes education, training, and capacity building with an emphasis on creating new opportunities for rural and Indigenous students and interweaving academics and Indigenous knowledge. And finally, the plan supports the administration's economic and health priorities by focusing on the needs of Arctic communities through the priority area on sustainable economies and livelihoods, and to the COVID-19 public health landscape through the priority area on community resilience and health. Next slide, please. Our collective response to climate change has never been more urgent or more necessary. And this plan creates a roadmap for research that helps us understand and respond to the changes in the Arctic and to address some of the major challenges faced by Arctic people, communities, and industries. So this Arctic Research Plan 2022 to 2026 outlines important steps for the federal government to equitably address the rapid social, environmental, cultural, and geopolitical changes that are now happening in the Arctic. We really are excited about the plan and look forward to working with Arctic communities, researchers, and other partners to implement it. Liz, over to you.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Nikoosh. Before we open the floor for discussion, I just want to provide a few resources. They're here on this slide, but I will also put them in the chat again. So to get the full text of the plan, you can go to iarpiccollaborations.org/plan. We also have a media kit at iarpiccollaborations.org/mediakit.html. If you have additional follow-up questions after our roundtable is over, or you'd like to set up an additional interview, you can please email me at liz@iarpiccollaborations.org. And we also are sharing more information on our social media, both Facebook and Twitter. And then I am just going to put up the slide with the speakers one more time. So we do have Dr. Lubchenco from the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, Dr. Nikoosh Carlo from IARPC, Dr. Roberto Delgado from the National Science Foundation, as well as Dr. Erica Hill from the National Science Foundation, Dr. Michael Falkowski from NASA, and Dr. Katya Kantar from the US Global Change Research Program. So as Liza put in the chat, you're welcome to raise your hand and ask your question, or I'll call on you for you to ask your question. You can also put it in chat. We would also appreciate it if you could state your name and your affiliation so that we're aware. So I'll open the floor. As we wait for questions, maybe I will ask some of the plan drafters if you want to just speak to what excites you about the plan. That would be maybe a good place to start. So maybe Mike or Roberto, if you would want to go first.
Sure, I can make a comment, and it's really focused on priority area 2, which was I was one of the drafters for the lead drafter, and really what excites me about that priority area is it's looking at how interconnected the Arctic systems, individual Arctic systems are with themselves, but also with the Earth system as a whole. Looking at things like teleconnections between changes in Arctic sea ice and mid-latitude weather conditions, for example. So it's really focused on science, but then there's also all the other 3 priority areas, which really tie all these scientific questions to Arctic communities and Arctic residents. So that's one of the most exciting things about the plan to me.
Thanks, Mike. I'll go next. Concerning priority area 1, which is community resilience and health, one of the things that I'm excited about in this new plan is really the extent and range of new opportunities for expanding cross-cutting science activities, more so than before, as in previous plans, in an effort not only to advance knowledge about the Arctic environment and its residents, but also to help inform decision-making. And community resilience and helps really ties in well to other priority areas. A lot of it is a result of changes in Arctic system interactions, also closely tied to economies and livelihoods, and certainly of concern for management of and mitigation of risks and hazards.
Erica or Katya, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, thank you, Liz. I actually would like to add on to what Roberto just mentioned. So with priority area 4, risk management and hazard mitigation, what really excited me to work on this section was not only is that the plan enhances collaboration among the federal agencies, but also it seeks to manage and reduce risk by bringing researchers together with Arctic community members and leaders, indigenous organizations, emergency managers, and service providers, as well as local researchers. And in that way, it will help to ensure finding the answers for decision-making questions that we have right now in art.
And I'm Erica Hill, and I was a lead drafter for Priority Area 3, which is Sustainable Economies and Livelihoods. This priority area focuses on the impacts of climate change on the human conditions in the Arctic, especially Arctic Alaska. I'm really excited about the fact that how well this plan articulates with the infrastructure investment plan that just got signed in, and how much synergies there's going to be between Arctic research priorities and the development of infrastructure, the maintenance of infrastructure, and better understanding of the infrastructure needs in Alaska.
Thank you both. Do we have questions? Again, you're welcome to raise your hand or put things in the chat.
So Liz, one thing that this report is really different in many ways from previous Arctic research plans. And I think it might be interesting to tease out what some of those differences are. And so either you, Liz, or Nikoosh might highlight some of the ways that both how the plan was developed, but what it is proposing to do is a significant departure that really recognizes the intimate connections across disciplines, but between knowledge and people's lives and livelihoods, and how they need to be interconnected. So if somebody wanted to sort of shine a spotlight on why we're so excited about this report and why it's so timely now, that might be useful.
Nikoosh, can I ask you to take that one, at least to start there?
Yep, I'll start with that. Thanks. So maybe I'll start with why I'm thrilled about the plan, because everyone else did, and so let me start there. So I think it's also important for that context for you to know that I'm Koyukon Athabaskan from the interior region of Alaska. I live and work on the land of the Duwamish and the Chinook peoples in Washington State, but my family has been in Alaska for many generations. So in that sense, the Arctic is home for me. And that's particularly important and salient to why I do the work that I do. The other thing that I'm really passionate about is working to include people that might not otherwise be heard, Indigenous leadership, knowledge, problem-solving solutions in processes that guide the delivery and use of resources. So in particular, in the context of this Arctic research plan, communities in Alaska have firsthand, on the ground, and in some cases multi-generational knowledge and experiences that is really critical to informing how research is conducted, on what topics, and how the results can be used for their own decision making. So in order to support that, relevant, timely, and flexible research and data is really essential in a region like the Arctic and in Alaska, where we're really experiencing very rapid environmental change. So what does this mean for the new Arctic research plan? So IARPC is aiming to be more responsive to communities by engaging more, listening, including their ideas while identifying strategic priorities. We haven't done this perfectly, and it has been an evolution and a process over the years. This is the third plan since IARPC has been functioning under the umbrella of the National Science and Technology Committee, the NSTC. So things have been done differently over the years, but we've really tried in this iteration to provide lots of opportunities for input from all the different kinds of communities that live and work in the Arctic and work on topics that are critically important to Arctic research. What else is new about this plan? The plan is a high-level strategy that is different than previous plans. And we think it will help to address some of the really urgent and emerging questions in the Arctic. That also means that IARPC is moving to a 2-year implementation cycle, again, to be able to provide the information in a very relevant and timely way, and to make updates as things emerge. The example you could point to would be the current COVID pandemic, but also I would say in the last 5 years, harmful algal blooms became an issue, and a lot of resources were sort of pulled together to study that and address and draw the links that were necessary among communities and with the federal research enterprise and others to be responsive to that issue. So with a 2-year planning cycle, that should help in that regard. And then the last thing I'll mention is that previous IARPC plans have been really focused on environmental processes, whether that's from permafrost or sea ice, but sort of distinct focus areas. And this is really a shift in this plan, a shift to look at things in a more interdisciplinary way, bring in those resources and knowledge base from the sea ice team, from the coastal resilience team, and really have a cross-cutting, a more holistic approach to addressing societal issues. So I'll pause there and see if any of the other report authors want to add anything.
I guess I would just follow up what Nikoosh said. Again, priority area 3 is focused on the human impacts of climate change and human responses. And there are so many major issues that are being exacerbated by climate change that this plan is readying us to deal with. So just pick up the newspaper and look at or read the newspaper online and think about the challenges to salmon runs in Alaska, or flooding and erosional risk in Alaska and how that impacts humans. Food security and how COVID has exacerbated that. All of these are really relevant research questions that this plan is setting us up to address in Alaska. So not only is it research-based and research-focused, but the natural and social systems are really integrated here, I think perhaps in a way that they haven't been in previous plans. And I'm really proud that the social sciences and natural sciences are really working together in this plan.
We do have a question in the chat from Jenny Dushek. Will you look at the impact of increased industrial shipping?
We actually have anticipated that as a research focus. We anticipate interest in that from everyone from the Army Corps to Department of Transportation. Certainly, this is an issue that also hits on hazard mitigation, industrial pollution, and it's a major concern of Alaska communities. So absolutely, I would expect that kind of question, which intersects with both, again, the social and natural sciences, to be addressed by many different federal agencies at a number of different levels.
To that point, I'll just add, I think what you said was right on, Eric. And I think that it also illustrates that really the plan is looking at places where federal agencies can work together, where we can draw on those assets on issues that are really cutting both across disciplinary topics, but also in who needs to and is absolutely critical to contribute in order to increase understanding and provide solutions. And so the plan does not represent everything that the federal agencies are doing in the Arctic. It really is focusing on those critical pieces and areas where people and agencies need to work together.
Nikoosh, while we're waiting for more questions to come in, perhaps it would be helpful to give sort of a framing of how this plan both is Alaska focused, but also international in scope in terms of the international involvement of organizations.
Yeah, good question. So the plan is it's written by federal agency staff. It focuses on many things that federal agencies can do, and focuses on the U.S. Arctic, which is in Alaska, but also recognizing, like Mike said, that there are many linkages between what happens in the Arctic and what happens elsewhere. So the implications for this work and for understanding what is happening in the Arctic and what the potential solutions to those challenges are really requires many different communities, including the international community, to come together. So throughout the plan development process, we certainly IARPC engaged with the U.S. representatives to the many different organizations that work internationally. Like I'm thinking about IASC, I'm thinking about the Arctic Council, which does a lot of research in the Arctic, supports a lot of research in the Arctic areas. So that information has been brought in. And really, if you look at who engages in an IARPC on the IARPC collaborations.org platform, anyone is welcome to contribute and attend and participate in the implementation of these plans. And there is a significant number of international researchers and others who do engage in that process. And let me, any of the other, there might be specific examples that some of the authors or others might want to add on.
I guess, Nikoosh, I can just reiterate what you were saying about the connections between the Arctic and the rest of the globe. Certainly what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. And I gave the one example of teleconnections between changing sea ice and how that impacts atmospheric circulation and mid-latitude weather, such as cold outbreaks in North America. And there's all sorts of other examples that we could tackle throughout this, through the Arctic Research Plan. Another one is how changes in the Greenland ice sheet, melting of the Greenland ice sheet impacts sea level rise across the globe, and how we can link that melting glacier ice to where sea level rise might be expected to be a problem.
And this is Roberto Delgado. I can add a little bit to that as well in terms of thinking about the international partnerships and the amount of support that different federal agencies are conducting. Greenland is an excellent example. The National Science Foundation supports a long-term observing station on the ice sheet in collaboration with their colleagues from NASA and NOAA, as well as with our Danish and Greenlandic partners. And so it's really important to ensure that not only you're working and coordinating, communicating clearly with non-federal stakeholders, but also to make a lot of those data accessible to a wider community of researchers, academics, and even the public to understand what those changes are, how they are happening, and what are those impacts. So international involvement is really key going forward.
We have another question in the chat from Jenny Dushek saying, so many agencies and stakeholders on tap seems like a powerful approach, but possibly slow. How will you ensure the relatively rapid responsiveness you mentioned? Nikoosh, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I think one of the advantages and what IARPC sort of brings to the table here is a space where federal agencies and non-federal entities are already in conversation. So in that sense, they're already, IARPC has a number of collaboration teams. There will be priority area collaboration teams once the implementation plan comes out. So that means that the structure for communication, the mechanisms for communication are being established and those channels are open. So in that sense, I think IARPC actually has a huge role in pushing and enabling really relatively fast responsiveness and communication in some places where agencies might not already be talking or have those channels. So I think in our experience, it hasn't been that this is a slow approach, but that this is a very effective way to facilitate those communications.
Nikoosh, or maybe one of the other participants, would you want to speak to the biennial implementation of the plan as well?
You know, from my point of view, something that I really like the difference between this plan and the last Arctic Research Plan. The last Arctic Research Plan had priority areas and several performance elements which were fixed for the 5 years. This plan was designed specifically to be more adaptive by not having a long list of performance elements, but rather establishing and reevaluating what we want to do through the biennial implementation planning process. So every 2 years, you know, we'll meet and revisit what we want to do and where we've been, and we can adapt relatively quickly to changing priorities in the Arctic, driven by agency needs, but also community needs in the Arctic.
Thanks, Mike. And I'll just add that we're getting started we're launching the Arctic Research Plan and also shifting into the biennial implementation plan process, which will play out over the next 7 to 8 months or so. But with that idea that there will be another opportunity to do that in 2 years and have those conversations around what needs to be updated, what is urgent that we need to put a focus on, and where can we bring the resources together. So looking ahead into what's coming up next, keep an eye on January through March of 2022, when the different priority areas, or the 4 priority areas and the foundational activities will be having meetings and talking about what potential objectives, what areas of focus they might take on for the next 2 years. So those conversations will be open and will benefit certainly from the many different perspectives and knowledge that can inform what those look like.
And while we give folks the opportunity to reflect and think of other questions, Jane, would you want to speak to how the plan fits into sort of the broader administration priorities in the Arctic?
Thanks, Liz. The Arctic is such an important region globally and for the US that in addition to this wonderful research plan that we're announcing today, the administration has reactivated the Arctic Executive Steering Committee, which is our mechanism for coordinating across the federal family, across the administration, all the different activities that are ongoing in the Arctic region, in Alaska, but the Arctic more broadly. The Arctic Executive Steering Committee is chaired by Dr. Eric Lander, who is the President's Science Advisor and the head of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, where I sit. And the Vice Chair is Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor. And so we have both science and security sort of tightly linked at the outset, but then it's all of the relevant federal agencies that are players in the Arctic are part of this. So that group is moving ahead with a number of initiatives that they are in the process of defining. We'll be sharing those in due course. We hired Ambassador Dave Balton to be the executive director of the Arctic Executive Steering Committee. The deputy director is Rachel Daniel, and the Arctic Executive Steering Committee has a special relationship to another really exciting enterprise that was launched on day 1 of this administration, and that was the reinstallation of the Northern Bering Sea Climate Resilience Area. This is the Northern Bering Sea. There is a task force of federal agencies that oversees the management of this area, and they have input from the Bering Tribal Council that advises the Northern Bering Sea Climate Resilience Area Task Force, and that group reports directly to the Arctic Executive Steering Committee. In addition to those, there is a national Arctic strategy that is being revised and is in the process of development. That is being led by the National Security Council and is also an interagency process. So as you can see, the Arctic is a really important place. It's important not only for the people who live there and work there, but for the rest of the country and indeed the globe. And so we in the administration are paying special attention to the Arctic because of its importance. As Mike noted and is often quoted, what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. And so this variety of activities that are underpinned by science and the kind of science that's being set in motion by the Arctic Research Plan being announced today, this portfolio of activities is really designed to have an integrated, smart, strategic, effective presence in, but response to an awareness of the Arctic. So it's actually very exciting. I would be remiss to not also mention the Arctic Research Commission, which is the US Arctic Research Commission, a presidentially appointed group that provides advice on research matters to the US government. So we have a lot of pieces, they fit together nicely, they're integrated, the key players talk to one another and are working actively to be as effective as possible. Much of the plan that we've talked about today and much of these other activities is not just government stuff. It's actually focused squarely on the residents in Alaska, what is happening in their lives. As you see from the bipartisan infrastructure bill that was passed, there's a lot of infrastructure needs in the Arctic and a lot of attention to the Arctic, in this case from Congress as well as from the administration. So it's a really important place, and we want to make sure that science is underpinning the policy and action that happens there.
Thank you, Jane. We have a question in the chat from Yareth Rosen. One of the challenges I keep hearing when it comes to Bering and Chukchi Sea issues is lack of information about what's happening on the Russian side. Are there ideas for improving cross-border Alaska-Russia communication and collaboration? Jane, would you want to take that, or Nikoosh?
So I actually would kick that to Roberto and maybe Nikoosh, because there are a lot of active research partnerships that are underway, and I think it's worth highlighting some of those.
Thanks, Jane. Yeah, I can kick us off and then allow others to weigh in. So we actually have a really good set of NSF-funded PIs who are Russian-born, but now based at U.S. institutions who are working collaboratively with their peers and cohort at different academic and research institutions across Russia. So these include some oceanographic surveys that are being done in that part of the Arctic Ocean, as well as a number of terrestrial-based observing networks around permafrost thaw, some atmospheric stations as well, some studies on nutrients and gas cycling across different sites in the Russian Arctic. And so from a research level, there's actually a relatively good amount of what we call science diplomacy in terms of active research collaborations for that level of engagement. Where we're having a little bit harder time, I think, is ensuring that the data that are collected on the Russian side are made easily accessible to the broader community. Certainly, those that are funded by U.S. Funding agencies have requirements to share and archive those data widely, but those that are solely supported by our Russian counterparts aren't always as easily accessible, in part due to language and in part also due to the manner in which those data are collected. But relatively speaking, there are already some existing mechanisms with several federal agencies. And I'll also note, Nikoosh mentioned the Arctic Council earlier. There is a binding agreement around scientific collaboration, of which Russia is also a part of. In fact, they're the current chair of the Arctic Council. So I know our U.S. Arctic Research Commission and leadership at NSF and NOAA and NASA are having internal discussions about improving those collaborations.
That was great, Roberto. I was also going to mention the scientific cooperation agreement that was negotiated under the auspices of the Arctic Council. And that's certainly one of those mechanisms to point to that is helping in this regard. I think the only thing that else I will add is that it's one of those things, I mean, I hear about it frequently, as you probably do too, Yareth. And it's one of those things where personal relationships and connections can really matter and help with that communication. Anyone else want to add something? Katya, you focus on international relations from your position, or others?
Yeah, I was going to just highlight again that there are existing areas and ways to collaborate through Arctic Council, and those collaborations exist in the Arctic. And it's very crucial because countries around the Arctic, in the Arctic, people in the Arctic face the same issues, many similar concerns. So those collaborations are very crucial to finding best solutions.
Are there any additional questions? Again, feel free to ask aloud if you prefer not to put it in the chat. And if not, I think I will ask our panelists if there's anything you'd like to end with, anything that we haven't covered that you want to make sure folks know about.
I'll just thank everyone for your time and attention today. I really appreciate the fact that, oh, thanks, Liz. I was gonna mention some of these things. If you hadn't had a chance yet, please take the opportunity to go download the plan from IARPCcollaborations.org/plan. Spend some time with it. It's not an overly long document. We try to communicate in a way that was accessible. Please ask questions. Any of us are available to follow up if needed. And if I haven't mentioned it already, take another look at the cover of the report. I'm really thrilled with the cover image, which was designed by Molly Trainer. Because I think it really captures, and there's a lot of details in there, but captures the approach that IARPC is seeking and aiming to take a more holistic view and thinking across different disciplines.
And I will echo those thanks. And if you would like to follow up with anyone, please feel free to send me an email, liz@iarpccollaborations.org, and I will get you in touch with the appropriate person. So thank you all for your time and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.
Big thanks
you,
to our
everyone.
panel. Thank you all. Thank you all for attending. Our next event, a media roundtable on changing environments in the Mississippi River Delta, will begin at 3 p.m. Central Time in about 1 hour. We hope you can join us for a future media event. That concludes this event. We will have the slides, the recording, and the additional media materials provided by the panelists available to you on the Press Information Exchange following this session. Thanks again for joining us. Bye.
Thanks, Liza.
Thanks, Liz. Nice work. Tough crowd.
Have a good day.